Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and I'm still battling the cold that's taking away my voice. But today I'm going to be talking about my favorite TTRPG publishers. Let's roll it. So, fun confession, I put off jumping back into the role-playing game hobby in part because I knew that once I did, I'd keep buying game after game after game after game after game, even if I never played most of them. And then the pandemic hit, and I suddenly needed to add something to my life that would keep me connected to community and not just sit around watching the world fall apart. And so I rejoined the hobby space. And 4 years later, I'm now working on collecting all of the games, even if I'll never play most of them. It's how my brain works. Most of the companies whose games I collected back in the day are now long gone, but the current crop of publishers are pretty okay with me. And here's a list of my favorite TTRPG publishers and why I appreciate them. So it might confuse some folks, but Goodman Games doesn't appear on this list because of Dungeon Crawl Classics. And don't get me wrong, that's a really good game. I think it's really fantastic. But I do need to get a hardcover of the core book because it's huge and that softcover book just is not a good reading experience. But that's not really what drew me to Goodman Games at all. What first drew me to their publisher was their original Adventurers Reincarnated series. This afforded me a chance to revisit classic modules from my youth, both as they were originally printed, sometimes multiple versions of those, and then also updated for 5e. I don't run 5e anymore, but they're still among my favorite TTRPG books in my collection because of the essays which open each volume. These convey reflections on how the adventures were developed, and as historic artifacts to the history of the game, I think they're amazing. Now, sadly, the license which allowed Goodman Games to publish the old TSR modules has lapsed, so the volumes covering the adventures I read as a kid, they're no longer available to purchase unless you can pick them up used or some remainders that are in warehouses some places. But the series is actually being continued with third-party adventures, and I think that's pretty cool. If I owned more books from the Arcane Library, I'd be covering this a little bit later in this video. But even though I only have one print book from the Arcane Library, the Shadow Dark Core Rulebook, Kelsey needs to be represented. See, what I appreciate about the Arcane Library is its dedication to simple fun. Shadow Dark is so easy to read, and the way Kelsey mixes concepts to form the game make me excited to play it. I am psyched to run my first gauntlet in just a couple of weeks. Kelsey's also a big supporter of third-party Shadow Dark products, which makes me an even bigger fan of what they do. So as the Arcane Library expands the official Shadow Dark line, my collection of books from it is going to expand because I'm excited about what they bring to the table. I was a bit hesitant to put Pickpocket Press on this list because I will be forever grateful to Stephen Grodzicki for inviting me to review his games. And I didn't want people to think that I appreciate Pickpocket Press just because they've given me free stuff. That's not the case here. What I appreciate about Pickpocket Press is that they take the D&D formula and they tweak it just enough to make it more fluid and dynamic. See, I love both their design language and the art choices for their books as well, both of which are really clean. Also, the way Pickpocket Press's games encourage players and GMs to make their own characters their own by designing their own personalized special features for character growth, that's so refreshing to me. I love it. Stephen's latest game, The Tales of Argosa, takes all the earlier concepts from Pickpocket Press games and makes them even better. And the art design in the new game, which I backed when it was up for crowdfunding, so I'm not just a freeloader from Pickpocket Press, it's stellar. All old school line ink drawing. It is beautiful. Also, I got to say, Stephen's one of the nicest people I've met in the hobby, and so I'm really, really glad I can throw him on this list. Savage Worlds has the distinction of being my favorite system that I have yet to play, either as a GM or as running a PC. And I'm going to rectify that as soon as I can because I like the system a lot. Pinnacle Entertainment Group creates beautiful books with fantastic artwork and great layout and interior design. but that's not what I appreciate most about them. What I appreciate most about Peg Inc., which is how they shorten their name, is how they manage to create companion books that tackle different genres that include a ton of different options for players, but aren't overwhelming for me as a GM. That is a difficult thing to pull off, and they have nailed it. Now, I have yet to pick up one of their official settings books, although I did back the new printing for Rifts for Savage Worlds Adventure Edition just last month, so I'm interested to see how their signature usability for GMs carries over to these new volumes. It might seem a little bit unusual, but what I appreciate most about Trollord Games is that they have a terrible business model, at least according to how things are normally done. See, from the start, Trollord Games has been determined to not have editions. So if you own a first printing of Castles and Crusades, you can play along just fine with people who are using later printings. In fact, we did this when I ran a CNC campaign for about a year or so. Someone did have an early printing of the game. It wasn't even in color yet. And the only real difference we found was that his equipment list, I think they had a whip, while my later printing, it didn't. Now, this is bad business. I mean, how can you induce customers to keep buying your books unless you give them edition FOMO? Well, Trollord Games manages to get their players to purchase new books because they keep adding value. Each printing has added new art, changed the layout, design language, and even organized the game in a way that made it a bit more accessible. And that's worked. People buy the newer books for the value they add, not because they're afraid they'll be left behind if they don't. The upcoming printings of Castles and Crusades, which just went through crowdfunding, is perhaps the closest Trollord Games has ever come to a new edition of CNC. But there's a reason for it. They excised the open gaming license from their products, and that required some significant editing. I've read some of the PDF for the new printing of the Player's Handbook, and I like a lot of the editorial choices that have been made. And it's also the first time they hired an actual editor, so odd phrasings that have been passed on through the various printings of the game, they're now being addressed. They've also tinkered with alignment a bit, and their changes might help characters role play a bit more without feeling constrained by what their alignment says they are. And yeah, so even though some quirks from editing have survived longer than they would have had a new edition of the game been created, the printings over editions is something I really do appreciate, because after all, even if you created a new edition of the game, that would just create a whole new set of editorial quirks that would have to be ironed out as the edition progressed forward. So I don't know if Chris Gonnerman considers himself to be a TTRPG publisher, but for the purpose of this list, I'm considering him one. Chris is the author of two games, Basic Fantasy RPG and Iron Falcon, and his dedication to the hobby community is something I admire. This is demonstrated so well through Basic Fantasy RPG, which is open source and community driven. The PDFs are always free to download, and even the print copies tell people, don't buy this book. You can even download the actual word processing files that were used to make the game, minus the art, which is under a slightly different license, and then you can alter it until your heart is content. You can even sell a game based on that content if you adhere to the license. So if you want to add homebrew rules to your table, or include more classes or races for your players than is in standard Basic Fantasy RPG, or even change the genre entirely, use that material and go right ahead. And the community for this game is strong. See, when the Coastal Wizards attempted to eradicate the license under which Basic Fantasy RPG was published, the forums leapt into action to expunge any open gaming license language from the game. The 4th edition of BFRPG was completed in just a few months, and it added a whole bunch of new art, offered some nice improvements in some of the book's language, and only made 2 changes to the core rules. It's fantastic. And going back to that license, if you do happen to release a game of your own based on Basic Fantasy RPG, please do 2 things. First, adhere to the license. That's an obligation. It's not a suggestion. Second, give some value back to the community on whose foundation you are building. The BFRPG community does not take kindly to the hard work of the creative team being pilfered for scam profit. You have been warned. And thank you, Chris, for your dedication to tabletop role-playing. So where do I start with Free League? Well, here's what. I don't know how they do what they do, because conventional wisdom says that a game company shouldn't be able to support more than one system for very long, if at all. Free League has 4 different systems for the fantasy genre alone, and supports a 5th with various 5e books which use their Symbaroum IP. They're also the rulers of licensed RPG Island with games like Aliens and Blade Runner, which people love, and for good reason. So you'd think with all of this content that maybe they'd phone it in every now and again, but Free League does not put out schlock. Their books are quality. They have great art, cool layout, and they're fun. I've played Free League's Dragonbane, Forbidden Lands, and Symbaroum, and have enjoyed each for their unique spins on gameplay. And I'm looking forward to the release of the Electric State sometime in the next year, which I backed when that crowdfunding campaign was going on, and my experience with Forbidden Lands, that's made me itching to revisit Mutant Year Zero or Coriolis the Third Horizon, just so I can gain some more experience with their Year Zero game engine. It's great. Now, I'm included among the content creators who are afforded an opportunity to get review copies from Free League, but they make such amazing stuff that I often end up buying their products anyway. The stuff is just that good, and the company's dedication to diverse options and excellent quality, that's remarkable. And I didn't even mention other games that they publish like Mork Borg or Into the Odd, or, well, I just did. Free League, I don't know how you do what you do, but I appreciate you for it. There is so much I appreciate about Monte Cook Games, but I'm going to start with this. My reviews of both Numenera and the Cipher System Core Rulebook remarked at the inclusion of some excellent essays on how to play the game, and they impressed me. But the more I'm exposed to Monte Cook Games products, the more I see how this is a rule rather than an exception. MCG's genre books, which are called white books by fans, they include a number of player-facing options. This is something we should expect in a TTRPG book that takes the base system and moves it into a new direction. That gives players something new to do with the game. That's not unusual. But the heart of those white books is the amount of advice that's given to the game master on how to design a game in that genre which fits both the expectations of players and game masters. See, Shadow, Dark, and Knave, they have tables upon tables upon tables for creating a world one step at a time, and I love them. And Worlds Without Number, that probably has the best world-building process that I've ever seen. It is amazing. But Monte Cook Games delves into the underpinnings of a world better than just about any other TTRPG publisher I've come across. I do have to say this, I'm a nerd, and I wish I would have minored in cultural anthropology back in college, so the fact that Monte Cook Games books do this often seems like they're written specifically for me. But if you want to add some extra depth to your world, in addition to the cool tables that you can get from other publishers, I recommend Monte Cook Games, and especially their white books. I also appreciate how dedicated MCG is to their fan base. When they were offered an opportunity to develop their own community platform, complete with live streaming, their first thought was how they could get the folks at Cipher Unlimited involved. CU is a fan-created Discord, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook group dedicated to all things Cipher System, and while they have a great relationship with MCG, they aren't official. See, MCG didn't really owe Cipher Unlimited anything. They could have jumped on board with the new platform without even blinking. But they refused to hurt a community who loves the games they design. That's a publisher I enjoy working with. And that's a good thing because I'm going to be doing some streaming on their community realm called the Anywhere Door once it opens up over on Moonbeam. Well done, MCG. All right, so that's my list. These folks all put out some wonderful products, and I think they're worth looking into. But that's my list of TTRPG publishers with whose products I have some familiarity. So I'm going to ask you now, what publishers would you put on your list that are worth checking out? Share them in the comments below. give me some new rabbit trails to follow, okay? So I am about halfway through writing my Dark Places and Demogorgons for Old School Essentials review, so you can expect that to go up probably next week. That also means that I'll finally get to start diving into Pendragon full force, and I'm so excited for that because I've been dying to get into it. Also, for Pirate Borg lovers, on Wednesday, September 11th at noon Eastern Time, I'll be chatting with Luke Stratton about the upcoming expansion for his amazing pirate game. So if you're able to come out and enjoy that stream, get into chat and ask him a question or two. So until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.